Peace be upon you, and welcome to a new episode. A team of security officers is digging in a remote area outside the city of Hale in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They uncover the body of a woman buried under the sand for many years. Her bones are broken, and her body tells a story of long and painful torture. Who is this woman who disappeared in secret, leaving no official trace? And how did this crime remain hidden for 6 whole years until a simple request for an official document uncovered everything? My friends, this isn't just a crime. It's one of the strangest mysteries ever to happen in the kingdom. If you're ready for a journey full of mystery and shocking twists, stay with me. And before we start our story, don't forget to like and share the episode so it can reach as many people as possible, and catch me every Saturday, Monday, and Wednesday for a new episode. Without further delay, let's dive deep into our story. This story began in early 2010 in the city of Hale, Saudi Arabia, where the Al-Rashidi family lived a calm, ordinary life. The father, Mohammed bin Dublan al-Rashidi, was a responsible and disciplined man. He worked a simple government job that provided the family with a decent living, and he made sure his children had everything they needed: education, health, and stability. His second wife, Saleha Al-Rashidi, who was in her 30s at the time, was a kind-hearted woman whose whole life revolved around her 2 young children, Ahmed al-Rashidi, who was only 11, and his little sister Huda al-Rashidi, who was 10. Saleha was the kind of woman who woke up early to care for the whole house. She prepared breakfast for the kids before school, helped them with their homework every evening, and encouraged them to dream of a better future. Her relationship with Muhammad was built on mutual respect and affection, without major conflicts. She had married Muhammad when she was young, so she was deeply attached to that home and to the entire family, both in spirit and heart. At that time, there was also Radi al-Rashidi, Muhammad's son from his first marriage. He was also in his 30s, a bit older than Saleha, unemployed, and completely dependent on his father's financial support. He spent most of his time at home, living without clear goals beyond a simple daily routine. Out of her big-hearted kindness, Saleha allowed Radi to live with them in the family house, since he was the half-brother of Ahmed and Huda. She tried to treat him fairly, sharing meals with him and including him in family conversations, even though she was never fully comfortable around him. By the end of 2012, everything changed for the family. Mohammed al-Rashidi suddenly passed away after an unexpected illness, and life turned completely upside down for everyone. Saleha, still in the prime of her youth, immediately decided she would dedicate her life entirely to her children, Ahmed and Huda. She wouldn't think about remarrying or seeking a new life for herself. Her focus would be solely on raising and educating her kids. She allowed Radi to continue living in the house, hoping he could help with the children. It was a decision born of her kind heart, even though she knew things would be financially difficult after losing the family's main source of income. But from the very first day after the funeral, Radi began to show the hatred he had long buried inside him toward Saleha. In his eyes, she had stolen his late mother's place and become the legal guardian of the children and the inheritance. At first, his resentment appeared in small ways, ignoring her during family conversations or making snide remarks about how she managed the house. Saleha endured his behavior patiently, wanting to keep peace for the children's sake and avoid direct confrontation. But Radi's psychological pressure grew stronger day by day until the house was filled with tension. By early 2013, the situation had clearly worsened. Radi took advantage of his father's death to assert control over the family. He suffered from untreated psychological issues, jealousy, frustration, and resentment over his unstable life. He began withholding a large part of the inheritance left by his father, claiming, "This money is only for the kids' expenses, not for you personally." But in reality, he was spending it on himself. Saleha tried to handle the situation wisely. She started doing small home-based work, selling homemade sweets and handmade items to neighbors, to cover Ahmed and Huda's school expenses and buy their books and clothes. But Roddy noticed. He began taking the money she earned and continued to mentally torment her, especially in front of the children, to instill fear and make Saleha feel completely isolated. Ahmed and Huda, still so young, would hear all the arguments and feel the tension. They couldn't do anything. They would hide in their room or spend more time outside just to escape the heavy atmosphere. Saleha tried to protect them, but deep inside she knew things were only getting worse. Every night she prayed to God to protect her family from what might come next. By mid-2013, Roddy began thinking of a bigger and deeper plan, a way to take full control of the house and the inheritance. The first step in his plan was to increase the psychological abuse to gradually weaken Saleha. He started depriving her of food on certain days under the excuse that there isn't enough money, or forbidding her from visiting her relatives while constantly belittling her with hurtful remarks. The second step was to gather precise legal information about the family inheritance. He secretly visited a lawyer and asked how he could gain full control of the family property after a certain period. He learned that if Saleha disappeared, he would become the sole guardian of Ahmed and Huda. The third step was to plan her final disappearance, but without drawing suspicion by killing her outright. Instead, he focused on the idea of gradual torture to make her eventual death appear natural to others, while in reality it would result from systematic beating. By the end of 2013, Radeh carried out the first part of his plan with minor assaults, like slapping Saleha across the face when she asked for her share of the money, saying it was a warning for next time. Saleha was terrified, but decided to stay silent for the sake of Ahmed and Huda. She sought help from one of her relatives, but he advised her to be patient. At that time in Saudi society, reporting domestic violence was considered a sensitive issue that could threaten a family's honor, so she chose to endure it. Radeh continued his abuse, roughly once every 2 weeks, building fear gradually. He always chose times when the children were away, making sure the injuries were not easily visible, like bruises on her arms that could be hidden under long sleeves. The atmosphere at home became heavy and tense. Ahmed began noticing that his mother seemed sadder each day, and Huda would ask innocent questions like, "Why does mommy cry alone?" But Saleha always reassured them, trying her best to keep things stable. At the beginning of 2014, Radeh chose a specific day, the day of the first major attack. It was a normal school day, and Ahmed and Huda would be away until noon, leaving the house completely quiet. That morning, Saleha was in the kitchen preparing a simple lunch for the kids. Suddenly, Radeh entered, grabbed an old iron bar from the garage, one he had prepared days earlier, and struck her on the head with a powerful blow, causing bleeding. That was the start of the torture. Saleha tried to fight back, but he hit her again on her left shoulder, fracturing the bone slightly, all while shouting insults to break her spirit. Then he carried out the next part of his plan. He tied her hands and legs tightly with a thick rope, wrapping it firmly around her wrists and ankles, and sealed her mouth with duct tape. 3 layers to completely silence her. He left her like that on the kitchen floor for hours, tied and helpless, while he sat in the living room watching the clock, making sure the children wouldn't return early. After about 2 hours, he came back and hit her again with the iron bar, this time on her ribs, delivering several consecutive blows. The torture continued for the entire day. Every hour he would return, to beat her again or hurl insults, trying to crush her will completely. He denied her food and water, calculating that dehydration would further weaken her. Saleha was struggling to breathe, her body covered in bruises, but the ropes were tight and she was already physically drained from the relentless abuse. The next day, Roddy repeated the exact same routine while the children were at school. He returned and struck her on the head with the iron bar again, causing swelling of the skull and a slight internal bleed. And he added blows to her legs to prevent her from moving if she tried to escape. He monitored her breathing frequently to make sure she was still alive, part of the plan to build psychological control, not just physical. The torture that day lasted longer, with short breaks when he left her tied up while he drank coffee in the other room, calculating every detail to avoid any mistake. Saleha was in a pitiable condition. Her body was full of fractures in the ribs and shoulder, and the pain caused her to lose consciousness at times, but Radeh would revive her with cold water so the ordeal could continue. The following morning, Radeh entered the kitchen after confirming the children were out and did what he always did. He took a break, and when he returned, he found Saleha dead, her body completely cold, her eyes open, and the fractures caused by repeated blows plainly visible. At that point, he called his older brothers, Hani Al-Rashidi and Aid Al-Rashidi, who lived in their own homes in Hale, and told them, "Come immediately, there's a big problem at the house." When they arrived half an hour later, they saw the body and were shocked by the sight, but Radeh immediately threatened them. "If you say a single word to anyone, I'll tell them you're accomplices and we'll all go to prison together." That was the threat he had planned, exploiting their fear of family disgrace. Hani and Ai, who were afraid of Radeh's strong personality and did not want to become involved, helped him reluctantly. They cleaned the place carefully, wiped the blood from the floor, washed the clothes, and burned the rope and the adhesive tape. Then they put the body in the trunk of the family's Toyota Corolla, 2005 model, and drove to a remote desert area about 50 kilometers outside Hale that Radeh had chosen. There, they dug a 2-meter-deep grave with the shovel from the car, threw her in the grave without any religious rites or washing, covered her, and made a small marker of arranged stones so Radeh would remember the location if he needed to check it later. They returned home as if nothing had happened, and Radeh ordered his brothers to leave immediately and keep the secret, which they agreed to. After that, when Ahmed and Huda came home from school that evening, they found Radeh sitting quietly in the living room. He told them their mother had died suddenly that day, of a heart attack, and that he had handled all the arrangements, including burying her in the main Hale cemetery. The children broke down in tears, but Radeh prevented them from learning any more details, saying they were too young to attend the funeral because the sight would traumatize them and that he would take care of everything. In truth, this was part of his plan to keep them from going to the cemetery or hospital and discovering the lie. The next day, Radeh went to a small print shop in Hale Market and ordered a forged official-looking death certificate, and he told his brothers Hani and Aid to tell everyone the death was entirely natural and that they had buried her in the official cemetery. No one suspected the lie at the time because the certificate looked sufficiently official. The family was relatively isolated with few visitors, and the community in Hale tended to accept family accounts of apparently natural deaths without deep verification. Radeh became the children's legal guardian, took control of the entire inheritance, and cut the children off from any extra money, while over time he reduced the frequency of the violence so as not to repeat the crime and arouse suspicion. In the following years, Ahmed and Huda gradually grew up surrounded by the shadow of their mother's memory. By the end of 2019, Ahmed was 17 years old, and had begun to feel responsible for his sister Huda, who was 16. Roddy continued to treat them harshly, depriving them of extra allowance, preventing Ahmed from going out to play with friends, and pressuring them psychologically with words like, "You need me. Without me, you won't survive." However, he reduced the physical violence to avoid visible injuries that could raise questions from school or neighbors. In 2018, Ahmed began to notice that Roddy was spending their inheritance money on himself. When he tried to talk to him about the money, Roddy responded with mild threats, which made Ahmed start thinking about independence. By 2019, Ahmed and Huda heard about the Orphan Assistance Program from the Saudi Ministry of Social Development, which provided monthly financial support to young people who had lost their parents and had no income, to help them continue their studies and daily life until they found stable jobs. Ahmed, who dreamed of going to university, saw this aid as a chance for freedom, so he asked Roddy for their mother Saleha's death certificate, but Roddy refused to give it to them. In January 2020, Ahmed and Huda decided to take action. They went to the Al Khalifa police station in Hale, where they met Officer Mansour. They briefly explained that they needed their mother's death certificate to apply for the aid, but their brother refused to give it to them. Mansour immediately sensed something unusual in their anxious expressions, so he called Rady and summoned him to appear the next day. Rady came in slightly nervous, saying he was very busy with daily matters and hadn't had time to get the certificate, but promised to deliver it soon. Mansour gave him a 1-week deadline. A month later, however, Ahmed and Huda returned to the station, saying Rady still hadn't given them the certificate. That deepened Mansour's suspicions, so he opened a preliminary investigation and summoned Rady again for questioning. During that session, Rady claimed he had completely forgotten about it because of his busy schedule and promised to handle all the paperwork himself, including applying for the aid. But just 2 days later, Ahmed and Huda came back to withdraw their complaint, saying Rady had promised to take care of everything. Still, Mansour noticed the fear in their eyes and their unnatural tension, so he started asking them what seemed like routine questions about the exact date of death, the name of the hospital where it happened, the burial place, and the cause of death. Ahmed and Huda, who didn't know precise answers, said that Rady had told them it was a heart attack and that he buried her himself in Hale Cemetery, and that they hadn't attended the funeral because they were too young. Mansour was stunned. The story made no sense. Any family would know details about their mother's death. At that moment, the real investigation began to take a deeper form. Mansour decided to expand the investigation himself and began taking systematic, precise steps to gather evidence without scaring Ahmed and Huda further. The first step was to send an official request under the name Saleha Al-Rashidi to all major hospitals in Hale, including emergency departments, requesting any medical records related to the supposed 2014 death, the date, cause, and any reports. The reply came after a few days. There were no records under her name anywhere, no death records, no medical visits. Mansour realized the mystery was deepening, so he went to the Civil Affairs Office and requested burial and death permits for 2014. There, the biggest shock came. There was no death certificate issued in the name of Saleha Al-Rashidi, nor any burial permit in any official cemetery in the city. This led Mansour to summon Rady officially for a full interrogation session and request the original certificate. Rady appeared 2 days later with a paper that looked official, listing the date and cause as a heart attack and naming Hale General Hospital. But Mansour, with his long experience, immediately suspected it. The stamp was unclear, and the paper did not match government templates. He immediately called the hospital for confirmation, and the response was, There are no records under the name Saleha Al-Rashidi in 2014. Here, Mansour ordered Radi to be detained pending investigation and launched a wider inquiry into his background. He discovered that Radi had older brothers living in Hale, so he summoned them separately. When they arrived, they were extremely nervous. After routine questions about their relationship with Saleha, Mansour issued a direct legal threat. Covering up a crime is considered participation in it, and you will be held accountable like the perpetrator. The pressure made them break down, and after hours of questioning, they confessed everything. These confessions were supported with precise chronological details, dates, tools used, and so on. Mansour recorded everything and asked them to draw a map of the burial site. Continuing the investigation in March 2020, Mansour confronted Radi with his brother's confessions and told him, "The witnesses are against you. The evidence is piling up. Confess and lighten your burden." Radi, seeing that the lie had been exposed, broke down psychologically and confessed to everything that had happened. He guided the team exactly to the burial site. On the same day, a full security team went to the desert outside Hale, dug, and recovered the body. The body was immediately sent for forensic examination, which confirmed multiple fractures in the skull, ribs, and left shoulder, internal bleeding, and that the cause of death was systematic, violent beating, and torture. This was further supported by DNA analysis of the blood found on old clothes discovered in the house during the search. The case went to court at the beginning of 2021, and finally, on July 31, 2023, a death sentence was issued. After an official royal order, the execution of Radi was carried out in a public square in Hale, bringing justice after 9 years since the crime. And with that, today's episode concludes. If this is your first time watching the channel, don't forget to subscribe and activate the bell to receive all new updates. Stay tuned for the next episode. Goodbye.